British Columbia Institute of Technology acknowledges that our campuses are located on the unceded traditional territories of the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh.
Welcome back into the nest. I'm Braden Goodman, and these are today's top stories, shaping our own backyard, province, country, and around the world. We start first with headlines from Washington. A vote to end government shutdown fails as Democrats hold firm on healthcare demands. A vote to end the government shutdown hours after it failed on Wednesday, as Democrats in the Senate held firm to the party's demands to fund healthcare subsidies that Donald Trump and the Republicans refused to extend. Blame was being cast on all sides on the first day of the shutdown. The White House and Congress failed to strike an agreement to keep programs and services open, throwing the U.S. into a new cycle of uncertainty. Staying with news happening south of the border. A massive brick chimney running 20 stories up the side of a New York apartment building collapsed after an explosion, sending tons of debris plummeting to the ground. Mayor Eric Adams said no injuries or deaths were reported after the collapse of the chimney, which rose up from the public housing building's boiler room. Officials were notified of an explosion in the Bronx just after 8 a.m. local time Wednesday, and still were trying to determine if there was a gas leak. The investigation is ongoing. Looking at what is happening across our country, we turn our national focus with some tragic news out of Alberta. The search for a 6-year-old boy missing for 11 days in the mountainous terrain in southern Alberta has been called off. RCMP Constable Gina Slaney says the search for Darius McDougall in the Crow's Nest Pass area has not turned up any trace of the boy. She says if the child is still in the area, he's believed to be dead. Searchers, helicopters, dogs, drones, and underwater teams have scoured 22 square kilometers of the woods since the boy disappeared around noon on September 21st. Darius was reported missing after he didn't return from a walk with 6 young relatives from the area that the family had been camping. The boy is from Lethbridge, Alberta, has autism, which rescuers say likely complicated the search because it may have prevented him from responding to his name. Slaney says the police investigation will continue as officers check tips and other leads. Turning our attention to BC, our top story is the BC GEU job action. Hundreds of British Columbians public sector workers marched through downtown Vancouver in a push for a new contract, after talks broke down with provincial government negotiators on Monday. Members of other unions, including the Professional Employees Association, joined the march in what began with the BC General Employees Union calls a show of solidarity. Participants chanted "Union Power" and "The Workers United will never be defeated" as they marched through the streets from the Vancouver Art Gallery toward Jackpool Plaza near the Vancouver Convention Centre for a rally. It comes after BC GEU President Paul Finch said the resumption of talks Monday didn't last long after the province presented a contract that was little changed from an earlier offer. Meanwhile, Premier David Eby said his government is trying to balance the value of work of public servants and the fiscal reality the province faces. Eby told an unrelated news conference happening at the same time as the march that the province made a, quote, good faith offer of 5% wage increase over 2 years with, quote, special consideration for those in lower paid roles. Eby stated that we're financially constrained right now. The global economy is slowing. There's a huge cost of inflation pressuring not just our government, but governments around the world and across the country. He went on to say, at the end of the day, we've got to make sure that taxpayers are protected, as well as the hardworking public service. And I believe we can do that, but we need to make sure that we're sitting at the table and hammering it out. The union has asked the province for a raise totaling 8% over 2 years. About 15,000 of the union's 34,000 workers involved in the dispute have been conducting some form of job action, including walking, picket lines, and refusing overtime. The man convicted of arson and firing a gun at the Vancouver home of Indo-Canadian pop star AP Dillon has been sentenced to 6 years in prison. Police say 26-year-old Abjit Kingra was handed the sentence in Victoria Provincial Court, with 4.5 years remaining after taking into account time served. The judge in the case found Kingdra is connected to the India-based Bishnoi gang, which was recently added to a federal registry of terrorist entities. And the attack at the pop star's home last year wasn't isolated. Kingdra was arrested in Ontario a year ago, while police continued to look for a second suspect who is believed to have fled to India. Additional police officers are posted at two Nanaimo high schools after an unspecified threat. RCMP say liaison and frontline officers are on site at Wellington High School and Nanaimo District Secondary School. The Mounties did not release details of the threat other than saying it was directed at both schools. Police say they understand their presence may unsettle some students, but additional officers were being deployed out of abundance of caution to control access and monitor the school grounds. A flood watch remains in effect for a remote area of BC Central's coast around the Kingcome River east of the Broughton Archipelago. BC's River Forecast Center says a hydromic station along the river wasn't reporting data, so nearby stations were being used to monitor conditions. Lower-level high stream flow advisories are meanwhile in effect for all of Vancouver Island and much of the South Coast, including the Sunshine Coast, Metro Vancouver, the North Shore Mountains, and parts of the Sea to Sky region. The advisories followed two storms last weekend, and the agency says an additional 40 to 100 millimeters of rain is expected through tomorrow. Police in Coquitlam are warning the public about a rising number of cryptocurrency frauds after receiving multiple reports. They say scammers typically reach out to potential victims over text, email, or social media with information about a perpetuated cryptocurrency investment app. The scammers then pressure victims to deposit money and invest more before asking for a hefty processing fee for withdrawal. Police say victims who pay the fee end up losing all of their money, and any potential investors should exercise caution before rushing to use any cryptocurrency app. Numerous Starbucks locations have closed across BC after the coffee giant announced last week it plans to lay off about 900 workers in North America. At least 12 Starbucks locations have been closed in communities, including Victoria and Revelstoke. CEO Brian Nichols said in a letter last week that he understood closing a location was difficult. But he said a review revealed some were either falling short of financial targets or failing to match consumer expectation. Following one of our today's top stories, President Trump's recent announcement of additional 10% tariff on Canadian lumber exports, our own in-house reporter, Joe McHugh, goes deeper into the story.
Canadian lumber companies were already subject to a 35% tariff on exports to the United States before President Trump announced an additional 10% on September 30th. While the tariffs themselves are hurting the industry, according to Jordan Blanchard from Central Cedar, the random nature of the tariff increases makes planning future business decisions almost impossible.
The part that we can't predict is when President Trump, in a tweet, just announces a whim that it's going to be 10% effective this date. The additional 10%, we were already kind of sucking wind with those outlooks, so another 10% is going to be that much worse for us.
As layoffs continue to increase across the forestry sector, the future of one of BC's most important industries remains uncertain. Joe McHugh, BCIT News.
Now let's dive into the world of sports. There's a lot of excitement for Canadians' favorite baseball team. The Toronto Blue Jays just announced that they will hold an intra-squad scrimmage today and tomorrow in preparation for Saturday's opener of the American League Divisional Series. Toronto will play the winner of the wildcard series between New York and Boston. Blue Jays manager John Schneider says he's been keeping a keen eye on the Yankees-Red Sox series.
I think there's certain things you look at. From a defensive, a base running standpoint, what they're trying to do tactically, what their pitchers are trying to do tactically, if it's anything different with holding runners or things like that. Good teams that get to this point make adjustments, and they know that teams are familiar with them, so there's usually a wrinkle thrown in there.
In other Blue Jays news, General Manager Ross Atkins says shortstop Bo Bichette is making progress as he rehabs a knee injury. Bichette has been sidelined with a sprained left knee since September 7th. Kevin Gausman is the likely starter for the Jays on Saturday. Moving on to the NHL, the Edmonton Oilers have acquired Utah Mammoth goaltender Connor Ingram in the latest attempt to find a solution in net. The Mammoth traded Ingram for future considerations, the team announced Wednesday. Utah had placed Ingram on waivers September 17th after informing him that he no longer fit into their goaltending plans for this season. Ingram went unclaimed. Utah is retaining $800,000, or just over 41% of Ingram's contract, which runs through this season and carries a $1.95 million cap hit. On to Vancouver's favorite team. The Canucks will face the Calgary Flames tonight in the second-to-last preseason game for both teams. While the Canucks have not formally released their lineup for tonight's contest at the Saddle Dome, it's likely the team will run with a veteran-laden lineup, since many of its top players have appeared in just one exhibition outing so far this season. The team still has pressing decisions to make on a number of hopefuls, so tonight's game will also be used as a key evaluation tool for some players on the bubble. Kevin Lankinen is expected to get the start and go the distance. Lankinen played 40 minutes last Friday in a 4-2 win against Seattle. A new report that forecasts a significant lodging shortage in Vancouver next summer during the 2026 World Cup Games is being used as a pitch by Airbnb for governments to loosen regulations on short-term rentals. Vancouver is scheduled to stage 7 matches at BC Place between June 13th and July 7th. Both the province and the city of Vancouver have regulations for short-term rentals, including rules on what type of homes can be used, and Vancouver requires all operators to also have a business license. The report by Deloitte and commissioned by Airbnb estimates accommodation capacity in hotels and short-term rentals around 42,000 during the World Cup for Metro Vancouver and about 23,000 for the city of Vancouver. It says that amount. That's all the time we have today. My name is Brady Goodman. On behalf of myself and our team, thank you for joining us here at the Nest, 1680 The Crow. Good day, and we'll see you tomorrow right here in the...
I would recommend this program for anyone that isn't sure what kind of job they want in media, because you learn everything from like public relations to communications to video editing, like radio, TV. So you do get a lot of experience in all the different fields in media.